Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the next episode for WCW Nitro versus WWF Raw is War. This review takes place for the episode on June 2nd of 1997. With this, these two episodes were really good. I enjoyed both of them. More WCW Nitro than Monday Night Raw. Explanation that I will get into as I go into it. But WCW Nitro for June 2nd of 1997 was an awesome show. I really enjoyed watching it. I actually watched the entire show. Did not skip a match. Did not skip anything on the card. This is actually a first for me to do that. Usually I skip through things I'm not particularly interested in watching. And WCW Nitro actually took place in Dayton, Ohio, in the Hara Arena. So let's get right into things. So we open up the program with Scott Hall and Syxx in the ring. They start running down their opponents from the last time the NWO were all together at Slamboree. When Hall starts wondering where Flair is, WCW Commissioner J.J. Dillon runs down with some good news. Ric Flair's on his way to Dayton as we speak, and he wants a match with Hall tonight. Hall tells J.J. Dillon that he has no control over him. If Hall doesn't come out and face Flair, then he can drop off the tag belts by J.J. Dillon's office first thing tomorrow morning. So there's your main event, basically. This was a very solid opener. I enjoyed a lot of the storyline build going into this show. They were 2 weeks out from Great American Bash, which was going to main event DDP and Randy Savage. I almost said Randy Orton. Randy Savage. And then you also had good old Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, the Outsiders, defending the tag team titles against Ric Flair and Rowdy Piper. Now, the stories were built very well. There was also a story with Chris Benoit, Kevin Sullivan later on in the show, which I'll get into. The first match that opened the show was actually Glacier versus Alex Wright. This match was alright. I mean, the crowd was really into it. They were happy to watch it. And Glacier beat Alex Wright. Mortis and Wrath actually attack with James Vandenberg, also known as James Mitchell, at the helm. Wright even joins in to make this 3-on-1, but he falls at this and eats a super kick from Mortis. During all of Glacier's comeback, Tony is busy talking up Ernest Miller for some reason, but he's never shown. Yeah, that's very true. Ernest Miller never showed up to the defense of Glacier. Why even care to help Glacier in the first place, I have no idea. So, whatever on that one. That is pretty pointless storyline. But get the bullshit out of the way early in the beginning of the show, I think, is the best thing. Buff Bagwell faced Joe Gomez. This was a quick match. Buff Bagwell wins with a blockbuster and gets the 1, 2, 3. Now, I'll be honest with you. Buff Bagwell can talk. I think he's a great talker. But as a wrestler, very slow, very dull, very boring. There's nothing much about Buff Bagwell I can say that's positive as a wrestler. But as a talker, he does a very good job of talking. So, they talk about Saturday night show that they're going to have at 7 p.m. Mike Tenay stands over by the guardrail and introduces a high school football picture of Ernest Miller. Blah, blah, blah. Who gives a shit? On to the next thing. We get Hugh Morris versus Prince Ikea. And this match was whatever. really didn't last at all because the match was stopped because Conan came out of nowhere, whacked Hugh Morris in the back of the skull with a broomstick. He apparently looked like he was fine for a moment and then started looking like he had just received a concussion. So the match only lasted 47 seconds technically, and that was that. So Mean Gene Okerlund meets with J.J. Dillon in the aisle, confirms that Ric Flair is near the building for tonight's main event against Scott Hall. J.J. then announces that the Steiner brothers are the _1 contenders for the Tag Team Championship. Well, what do you fucking know? Something that makes sense. Scott Steiner and Rick Steiner were the former tag team champions before the, Hall and Nash were the tag team champions. And the reason why they were actually stripped of those tag team titles by the NWO because claimed, quote unquote, there was some mishaps that happened during that match. So they went ahead and had to give back the titles to the NWO Outsiders. So technically they were screwed out of the match at the end of the day. So bottom line, there's really nothing much to it. It really didn't. It was really simple that they got the tag team title opportunity. But there was a team that also deserved it who was on a winning streak. That's Harlem Heat. So Harlem Heat and Sister Sherry head out to try and intimidate J.J. Dillon into making them the top contenders, and it didn't seem to work at all. After that, we get a special video, and also, not to mention, Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner were to have a match with the Great Muta and Mashiro Chono for a tag team matchup, and if Rick and Scott Steiner won, they were already heads in for that match. But before the match actually happened, they showed a video package of Diamond Dallas Page preparing for his match against Randy Savage. Goes on to say he proved everyone wrong. He showed the world that no one wanted to be at the top of the wrestling business more than he does. He banged Randy Savage in April at Spring Stampede, and he'll bang Randy Savage again at the Great American Bash on June 15th of 1997, of course. So, this was a great promo. If you have never seen this episode or have not catched any WCW action, this is definitely a segment you want to catch. It was actually rather good promo video, so it was actually well done and put together the right way. So Great Muta and Marshall Chono versus the Steiner brothers. This match actually, unfortunately, ended in 8 minutes and 55 seconds, thanks to Harlem Heat interfering and costing the Steiner brothers the match, and they end up losing. So, at this point, out comes J.J. Dillon to let Harlem Heat know that this last match will be reviewed due to nefarious involvement, and J.J. tells them that maybe Harlem Heat should worry about their own match lined up for tonight. Booker says tonight is just about slaughtering a couple of suckers. And that's pretty much that. They get a match later on during the show, which wasn't that bad, and of course, you would think that the Steiner brothers would return the favor, so that's obvious. So Hour 2 comes up, and this is hosted by Tony Schiavone and Bobby Heenan this time. Larry Labisco is actually the first hour with Tony Schiavone, and then Bobby Heenan is the second hour with Tony. So the first hour gets a quick recap before Mean Gene Okerlund brings out Ric Flair to respond to the challenge. He says he doesn't know if he can beat Scott Hall, but he knows he wants to find out. Woo! Nash isn't here. It's just Hall and 6 tonight. He promises that he will stomp a pothole in Hall's toothpick chewing white honky poster ass. So, this promo by Ric Flair was fucking off the chain. Probably one of the best promos I have ever heard Ric Flair ever do. And I'm pretty sure he's done maybe something better than this, but from what I have seen, there was a lot of intensity. He was fucking outrageously insane and funny at the same time. He was ruthless in this promo. He seemed like he was ready to go into war and kick Scott Hall's ass. Which, by the way, was a fucking spectacular match. And I'll get into that. So the next match after that with the segment was the WCW United States Championship match with Dean Malenko versus Michael Wallstreet. I'm going to say this. Oh, excuse me for a moment. I'm just lifting up my leg here because I'm sitting on the floor of my room right now. And I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. But anyway. So, bottom line. One thing I will say about WCW that I enjoyed. I like the fact that WCW would have their champions defend the titles if they were in action. And I think that's the right way to do things. If you're going to have your champion, a singles wrestler, or a singles champion, be in action on the episode, make him defend the fucking title, for God's sakes. Now, if you want to bring your singles champion into in the show, I mean, not pay-per-view, but in the show, you want him to have a match, have him in a tag team match. It makes more sense. But to have your singles competitor as the champion not defend the title and be in a singles match seems really fucking stupid to me. I don't even see the point. So, kudos to WCW back in the day for doing stuff like this. Now, granted, every single week of them having the champion defend the title, I think was a little over ridiculous. Like maybe once every couple of weeks, once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, or just once every month for the pay-per-view and build a program with the champion and challenger through promos and tag team matches or interferences or something of that kind of nature that brings value to them competing at the pay-per-view itself. And I think that's how wrestling should be. I really think that modern day wrestling should have the champion defend the title when they're in singles competition. And if you're not going to have them defend the title, don't make them have a match. Let them rest. Let them prepare for a big matchup for a pay-per-view so they can go 20, 30 minutes and not feel like they've been through a meat grinder, So, I think that's something that wrestling in modern day era of all promotions, that's WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, whatever. I think that is definitely something that should be looked at as something they should do on a consistent basis. So, I think the champion should have the ability to be able to lay off from wrestling as often. So, that's just my opinion on that. Anyway, so yeah, Dean Malenko beats Michael Wallstreet, no brainer on that. After the match was over, Mean Gene Okerlund gets with Jeff Jarrett and Deborah. Jarrett wants a rematch next week on Nitro in Boston. Malenko gives him the rematch and tells the world that he will prove that he wins over Jeff Jarrett at Slamboree was no fluke. All of a sudden, Steve McMichael is asking why he didn't talk this over with his fellow Horsemen members. Jarrett says he's just looking out for number one now and tells Deborah to leave with him. And Mongo doesn't quite care for that, but he'll take care of the situation backstage. As for Kevin Green, he calls what Green did stabbing him in the back 2 weeks ago on Nitro, totally forgetting that the whole reason Green did in the first place was because Mongo stabbed him in the back last June. He also mentions in that promo that with him competing against, with Kevin Green competing against Steve McMichael, it helped Kevin Green redo his, kind of get his career back on track as a football player, which I did not agree with at all. I think Kevin Green was a fantastic football player. He started with the Pittsburgh Steelers and then played for the Carolina Panthers. And he was one of the top defensive backs, or not defensive backs, defensive linemen that you'll ever see. So I don't understand what the hell the comment was of that, talking about his NFL career and comparing it to a wrestling show like WCW. I thought that was fucking stupid. Even though I liked the show and I actually enjoyed watching it, there was some parts of the show that was really stupid, and I'm going to criticize that no matter what, even if the show was great. There's always things and flaws in the show, and I'm going to point them out regardless. So don't, go, oh, he says he likes the show, but then he's shitting all over it. It's not exactly shitting on it. It's just pointing out the stupid parts of the show that made no sense. So Harlem Heat face Salupo and Damien. These were two luchador wrestlers. Basically, this match was very solid, decent matchup, 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Though the match ended up being a screw job by the Steiner brothers, returning the favor. And at this point, they roll Booker T back in as Damien splashes from the top of for the 1, 2, 3. And there you go. And that's the end of the match. So at this point, you're pretty much thinking to yourself, they're probably going to schedule a tag team match with the Steiner Brothers and the Harlem Heat for the Great American Bash show, so that they can determine the number one contender, since both teams actually lost during this episode. So that's pretty much where I would think this is going. They did not mention that yet at this point in time during this episode, so they didn't really... I'm imagining they're going to state that on the Go Home show. So, the next match was Chris Benoit versus the Barbarian. Now, this matchup was supposedly Chris Benoit's opportunity to defeat... If he defeated Barbarian, he would get Kevin Sullivan at the Great American Bash. Unfortunately, even though he defeated the Barbarian by the Crippler Crossface and made him tap out, the match ended, and then Benoit asked Jimmy Hart, when is he going to get Kevin Sullivan? Jimmy tells Benoit that he just made it a lot harder on himself. He'll have to face another opponent in another death match, but he won't tell Benoit who that person is until next week. And that's pretty much that, setting up another decent matchup. But I believe Chris Benoit faced Ming in a death match in the Slamboree show. Let me go back on Slamboree just to check and see who Chris Benoit faced at that show. So give me 1 second here. Let's see here what we got going on. Results. Yeah, so Ming actually did face Chris Benoit in a death match. And that's what happened during that match. So overall, they're putting him in a situation where he's going to have to defeat probably Ming again in a death match, where if he wins, he'll be able to face Kevin Sullivan at Bash of the Beach. That's where I'm kind of leading or believing it's going to go to. Next after that was Ric Flair, the Nature Boy, versus Scott Hall with 6 in his corner. And this match was great. I mean, it was fun. It was very enjoyable. It got me very involved. I felt invested in this matchup. It was definitely what they were claiming was a pay-per-view type of match. I totally agree with that. This match could have been placed in a pay-per-view as a one-on-one matchup. I don't even think Ric Flair and Scott Hall ever had a one-on-one match ever in the history of their careers until this episode. So, this matchup was back and forth. It almost ended up with Ric Flair winning. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Scott Hall and the NWO beat the shit out of Ric Flair, leaving him on the mat. Match ended in DQ. And at this point, that was that. Mongo and Jeff Jarrett actually come down to do the save, but they were a little too late on this one. So I don't understand what the fucking point was for them to even show up if they didn't want to go ahead and help him in the first place. And something that the person who wrote this article is very true in what they're saying is the Four Horsemen still exists. I mean, that's a good question because I didn't see the Four Horsemen at all in this situation. I didn't see an Arn Anderson. I didn't see Jeff Jarrett. I didn't see Chris Benoit. I didn't see fucking Steve McMichael showing up doing anything during the time that he was getting his ass kicked till after his ass beating was over. So that's pretty fucking messed up. So after the match, we had a last go-home segment for the show. It was actually Randy Savage. Now, Randy Savage was dragging Mean Gene Okerlund to the ring and trying to get an interview with him. And Mean Gene didn't want to do anything with Randy Savage. He wanted nothing to do with Randy. So Elizabeth is there too at this time, and Savage tells the world that he's the best wrestler, past, present, and future. Gene says that somebody needs to bring him back down to earth. That was the wrong thing to say. That's what Savage says. To Mean Gene Okerlund. Savage grabs him by the tie, this time as WCW figurehead. J.J. Dillon heads down to intervene. Gene has had enough and leaves after handing the mic over to J.J. Dillon. Savage gets scolded for putting his hands on a WCW announcer. J.J. calls Okerlund the Dean of Wrestling Journalists. Gordon Sully is Gene... sorry, that's just something the writer made. I don't know why they put all this extra dialogues, putting their own opinions in it and just not saying what happened. So J.J. Dillon tells Savage that he used to have respect for him, but no longer. At one point, J.J. feels that Savage at one time would have handled the situation with Diamond Dallas Page face to face like a man, but now Savage is addressing his problems from the upper decks of the Coliseums all over America, hiding behind Elizabeth. Savage snaps at this point and starts assaulting J.J. Dillon, which, my God, was beautiful. I mean, it was fucking beautiful. The way he hauled off and hit J.J. Dillon in the fucking face. They had security. They had Eric Bischoff there trying to hold him back so he couldn't get Eric Bischoff and the rest of the NWO in any more trouble than he probably already did at that point. So he's trying to hold him back, and he says, it's not the time. Don't do it. Calm down. Relax. Chill out. Take care of it at Great American Bash and kick DDP's ass. And that's pretty much it. But then at this point, Savage calms down, but then goes ahead and strikes fucking JJ Dillon again. And they had to pull him off again. And at this point, Eric Bischoff gets on the mic and tells J.J. Dillon that he brought this on himself. Well, and that's pretty much that. And he went ahead and he also says, snap into this DDP. And that's all there was to this entire episode. Granted, I didn't do the most fantastic job trying to read this garbage of information from this person who wrote this article, which I need to find another place to start doing these reviews for. But I have to say that this was a fantastic show. I mean, it had some, logic gaps that didn't make some sense here and there. But overall, building the show up towards the Great American Bash, they did a decent job for that. Now, on the other hand, WWF, Raw is War. This was a decent show. It had some good stuff going on. It seemed like it was going to be better than WCW at one point, but it kind of died off near the end. So Raw opens up with a montage showing what happened last week in Undertaker's long entrance. Nitro already has audience hooked with the promise of Scott Hall challenging Ric Flair. As you already know, Undertaker tells Vince and the world why he rejoined Paul Bearer and the dark side. It's all because Paul is blackmailing him. He did what he did to protect the ones he loves. Okay. Is The Undertaker capable of love at this point? That's a good question. He seems a few tweaks away from any kind of healthy relationship. No one will understand why he did this since the information and people Undertaker is trying to protect will not be made public. And oh yeah, Paul Bearer is certainly going to hell. Out comes Paul to pull the reins back on his champion. Paul looks forward to destroying everybody in WWF with The Undertaker so he can become the ruler of the world. Somebody say ruler of the world? Out comes Psycho Sid to return from injury and demand his WWF title rematch after losing the strap to The Undertaker back at WrestleMania 13. His purpose of why he didn't challenge sooner was on account of the fact that he felt The Undertaker was defending it like a defending champion. But when he saw Paul Bearer, see him join with Paul Bearer again, he demanded a match. Now, this match actually wasn't made as a WWE or WWF World Championship match to be the main event of the show. It was just a non-title matchup. Now, granted, I agree with the idea that it was non-title because, quite frankly, this was the go-home show for King of the Ring, which, by the way, I will go ahead and review that this week about that show on Sunday night. But just getting into this with you guys, this was kind of like it made sense that they didn't make the title match happen because Farouk was getting an opportunity against The Undertaker for the WWF title at the King of the Ring pay-per-view. So considering Farouk is supposed to face The Undertaker the following Sunday at King of the Ring, he certainly has an issue with this match. He heads out with the Nation of Domination. Farouk calls Undertaker a coward for backing down to blackmail. So Taker comes over and chases his crew away while Sid soaks up the cheers in the ring. At this point, we get Farouk versus Ahmed Johnson when they come back from break. This feud is actually a great feud. This was a 10-month-long feud at this point. They did a fantastic job with these two guys. Ahmed Johnson was sustaining a lot of injuries and so forth, so it was kind of on and off for those 10 months. Now, This match ended with Taker actually Irish whipping Farouk into Ahmed Johnson, which accidentally sends him into the ring steps. While the Nation gangs up on Taker, Farouk quickly rolls Ahmed back inside the ring for a cheap 1-2-3. Now, I will say this. Ahmed Johnson was shortchanged in my opinion. I think that Vince McMahon shortchanged Ahmed Johnson at the time because I felt Ahmed Johnson was a very beloved wrestler by Vince McMahon at one point, and he kind of just didn't do nothing with him. Just let him go after, I think it was this year is when Ahmed Johnson retired from WWE, and by late 1999, early 2000, he joined with Stevie Ray as the Harlem Heat 2000 tag team, replacing Booker T. So, once the Nation completely clears out, Taker meets Ahmed in the ring, and he clearly is pissed after the loss and tries to confront the champ, but Taker doesn't really care and leaves Ahmed laying with a chokeslam for being bold. And that's it. So we go ahead and we get a flashback from what happened last week with Steve Austin attacking Bret Hart after the winning the tag team titles with Shawn Michaels and re-injuring Bret Hart's knee. So the match with Shawn Michaels will no longer be happening at the King of the Ring. So that definitely explains why we didn't get to see Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart. Originally, Stone Cold's opponent at King of the Ring was supposed to be Brian Pillman. That would have been a very good matchup for King of the Ring, but they later postponed that match for the Monday Night Raw episode the next week, or the next day after King of the Ring, and just make Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels opponents one-on-one as tag team champions, which is the first time ever with this situation. So out comes the Hart Foundation. Vince has Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin split screen on the Titantron, and Bret says he's tired of these Texans making excuses over their bad legs, even getting in a dig on Michael Johnson, who got smoked by Canadian sprinter Donovan Bailey. He continues to tell Shawn that he doesn't get his big dream match at the King of the Ring because Steve Austin re-injured his knee. Shawn Michaels makes sure to follow up on the smoked comment by giving it a different meaning. This guy is an adult, right? HBK blames Steve Austin for making it so he can't get rid of the USA of Bret Hart, which is a good point. Why the fuck would you go ahead and re-injure a guy who was willing to have a match for 10 minutes, and if he didn't beat him in 10 minutes, he quit wrestling in the United States of America? Austin says he tried to take out Bret for good, not just in the U.S. Shawn keeps saying Austin can't get the job done, so Austin tells him to come in the U.S. I lost my spot here. Sorry. He blames Austin for... Okay. So Austin tells him to come find him. Well, actually, he was trying to make sure that Bret was out for good, not just in the U.S. Shawn keeps saying that Austin can't get the job done, so Austin tells him to come find him. HBK obliges, and it's basically a high school courtyard fight. A lot of yelling and trash talking, but no punches thrown. Back to the ring, the Hart Foundation are loving what they are seeing. Bret gives Pillman an idea and then tells the world that he's willing to give up his chance to take on Stone Cold Steve Austin at King of the Ring so that Shawn Michaels can face him instead, so they can work out their differences so long as Pillman gets a match with him real soon. Austin says after he beats HBK at King of the Ring, he'll be more than happy to kick Pullman's crippled, raspy, hoarse-voiced behind on Raw's next week episode. Which I thought was fucking unbelievable. Austin was, like, right on point. The way he just trash-talked fucking Brian Pillman there. I thought that was great. So... and he also says that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so, which is classic line that Austin used to say all the time, catchphrase, whatever. So Owen Hart defended the Intercontinental Championship against Bob Holly because Bob Holly actually won his match 2 weeks ago. Hey, what do you know? Bob Holly wins a match 2 weeks ago, and they skip a week to allow Owen Hart to defend his tag team titles with the British Bulldog against Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Ain't that fucking cool? Ain't that amazing? We went ahead, we had a loss, and then we skip a week and allow a week to go by to have this match later on instead of having it the next week afterwards. Something WWE has lost the concept of. Jesus Christ. Not to mention, why aren't they allowing guys nowadays to carry multiple championships at a time? I thought that was cool back in the day as well. So, Owen Hart beats Bob Holly in a decent 3 minute and 18 second match with a sharpshooter victory. Solid matchup overall, so I was very content with that match. And Vince asked Shawn who is backstage if he will accept the challenge. Okay, wait. Vince asked Shawn who is backstage if he will accept the challenge to face Stone Cold at the King of the Ring. He says absolutely he will, and Pillman can have what's left of Steve Austin next week. They show us some of the crazier parts of Mick Foley's interviews with Jim Ross from last week's episode, and then we get a part 3 in the next hour, which was actually really fucking good. After that, let me just say this. After that, the show kind of went right down the fucking toilet. It really was kind of boring. I didn't really care for it. It was really meaningless garbage. Except for the main event, which was decent. But other than that, the rest of the show was just dead after Mick Foley's segment. So Goldust faced Hunter Hearst Helmsley in a one-on-one match. Unfortunately, this matchup ended having some miscues between Triple H and good old Chyna. Chyna was at ringside. So was Terry. She was actually known as Marlena at the time. And Terry goes ahead and tries to grab Chyna's foot when she's on top of the apron trying to hold Goldust back while the referee wasn't there. And I think the referee was knocked out at the time. And so Hunter Hearst Helmsley was Triple H wanted to go ahead and hit Goldust with some good old shot to the knee, the gut, and unfortunately that was messed up because Chyna was distracted by Terry, and Chyna got hit in the back by with a high knee by Triple H, knocking her off the apron. Goldust actually sneaks a roll up and gets the 1-2-3 at the end of the match, and that's that. So in the back, Hawk says he and Animal have never had the problems Shawn and Austin have had, and that will be their demise. Hawk says they will kick Shawn's teeth down Austin's throat. Thought that was a fucking great comment. Very funny comment, actually, to even say something like that. I thought it was kind of cool. So, moving on here, we're in hour 2. The WWF Tag Team Champions, Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin versus the Legion of Doom. This matchup was decent, and it was pretty long for the other matches. It actually lasted 7 minutes and 5 seconds. There was actually a brawl outside to give LOD a count-out victory, but unfortunately not giving them the titles. Austin and HBK actually start going ahead and attacking each other, which is fucking bizarre. And that was pretty much that. And the match ended that way with a count-out. We think on Mick Foley's Part 3 discusses basically what he did in between his WCW and WWF runs, which was mostly FMW death matches and working for ECW. Lots of footage shown with Foley and Terry Funk, and then they state that next week he'll talk about what he's done so far in the WWF. Now, he talks a lot about how he was beloved in ECW for the things he did, as well as the death matches he had in New Japan Wrestling. So, he actually really mentions a lot of stuff here that states, why was I loved there, but here in WWF, I'm not loved at all. I'm disliked and nobody likes me or cares about me. So I do believe that later on in the next couple of months, we see a development of a character for Mick Foley where the people start to get behind the Mankind character, because he mentions and introduces the characters of Do Love, Cactus Jack, and Mankind. So eventually, you're pretty certain you're going to know that you're going to see something unfold with Mick Foley becoming somebody else. That's probably more than likely that's what happens. So Mankind, right after that segment, he actually has a match with Savio Vega, and Mankind wins the match by pinfall thanks to a mistake made by Crush, who hits Savio by mistake to give Mankind the pinfall in the 1, 2, 3. Most of this was spent with good old Jerry Lawler talking a lot of smack towards Mankind for being a freak and a really crappy wrestler, which probably is very true that Jerry Lawler didn't like Mick Foley at the time. Until later on, he probably earned respect from Mick Foley. But I don't think he cared for Mick Foley in those death matches and the ECW days, because he didn't really care for ECW at all. He absolutely hated ECW. So from here we had the WWF Champion Undertaker going one-on-one with Psycho Sid. This match lasted only about 5 minutes, but it was really good 5 minutes between these two guys. They really kicked each other's ass. Some choke slams hit by good old Psycho Sid. Taker escapes from the chin lock and hits the flying lariat to mount the comeback and tombstoned Psycho Sid to get the 1, 2, 3 to end the match. Out comes the Nation to attack the WWF Champion. Sid tries to save with choke slams, but the numbers by the Nation are just too great. None of the wrestlers, not even the Legion of Doom, come out to help these two. Finally, WWF agents do their best to get the Nation of Domination out of the ring. And that's that. So, that's pretty much the overall episodes of these two shows. And like I said, WCW Nitro held its own for building up their show. WWF did a good job at first, but like right after the WWF Tag Team title match, everything kind of seemed to just go straight downhill in hour 2. I don't know why it happened that way. It just did. And I didn't particularly care for it. I was really more looking into my cell phone and doing whatever on my cell phone, looking at videos and what have you. It just didn't really gain my interest that much. So I just kind of didn't care. Now, the main event I did care about. I thought that was a decent matchup. But it was way too short. It didn't even feel like a main event match. It felt like a regular, ordinary matchup that didn't get enough time to actually develop. But nonetheless, WWF Raw's War for June 2nd of 97 I thought was okay, but WCW Nitro for June 2nd was a lot better. So anyway, guys, I thank you very much for watching. Hit the like button if you like this video. Hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed to the channel. And leave a comment down below, and I'll get back to you on that. And I thank you very much for watching. Have a great night, guys. Bye.